Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy, you could never unlock my secret. Oh no! Suddenly, no, leave me! Let's begin. Indeed.
Just copied that. I was waiting because I didn't want to say anything until you had something to share. So,
all right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is the Fireside Chat, and I am speaking with our very special guest, BiggusGeekus. That's what I'm calling you, unless you have like another name you prefer to go by.
Joe works. That's
okay. Joe. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think I can handle Joe. I think I can handle that.
BiggusGeekus is the name of our program. So
yeah. So Biggest or Joe, you are working on a project. Essentially, it's a alternative to the existing sort of online marketplace in particular, and it's an alternative to a website called DriveThruRPG. And so for those of you guys who may not know, we're talking mostly about the sort of tabletop hobby, culture, and how this kind of like orthodoxy, the cathedral, has essentially found its way into that, just like it has in every other corner of our, not just our popular culture, but even our slightly more, let's say, obscure cultures. And this has caused some problems for you and like for people who have always been involved in the hobby of tabletop gaming. In case you guys don't know what that is, that's like Dungeons and Dragons. It's like tabletop role-playing games. It may also include other kinds of games. I mean, I know that at DriveThruRPG you can buy board games and like other things. I believe so. I might be wrong. I might be thinking about something else. And so anyway, this is something that people who would never have typically found themselves, like on a side in a culture war, are now finding themselves. And because you've been dragged into this and you don't like the way that this website, DriveThruRPG, has been, let's say, behaving recently, you're making your own alternative platform. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Board games, I would say probably not. Anything that you can get on-demand printing for, pretty much they handle on the geek side, and on-demand printing of board games is kind of a challenge.
Yeah, I guess it would be. Yeah.
Too many different things to put together. But DriveThruRPG, actually, there's been a couple of real recent issues that have just brought it to a head. It's always kind of been simmering. I mean, you brought up the cathedral. I wonder if that's from Michael Malice, because that's where I heard that from, and he got that from somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the cathedral for a really long time. I've heard, Michael Malice has said it. Yes, I don't watch a lot of his content, but I know of him, and I know that he does discuss these things. But yeah, I mean, like we've been talking about, it's the same concept. We've been talking about this kind of attitude from a religious, or I mean, I wouldn't even say religious, because in a way it's a little unfair to actual like religious people, but it's organized in a very like cult-like way. It's like,
yep.
And so we've been calling it that for a while. I don't know where it originated, but yeah,
right.
it's a pretty old idea. It is.
It's a good term because it comes from the same place, because a lot of these folks lack any sort of religious thing in their life.
Mm-hmm. So they fill it with this.
They fill it with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
The bad part, the worst part of what religious organization ends up with a group of nitpickers and troublemakers, and that's what ends up happening. So a couple of recent incidents with DriveThruRPG, a couple of folks posted. So essentially what it does is it aggregates independent game makers.
We're talking about DriveThruRPG right now?
Yeah, DriveThruRPG.
What it does, okay.
It aggregates independents, and they also sell stuff for Wizards of the Coast. They have some sort of closer relationship through One Bookshelf. That's the parent company. And they have not just RPGs, they have drive-through cards, and I think comic books, any kind of printable media that you could, to ask somebody to print for you, they handle, or that could be in PDF format. Mm-hmm. So a couple of folks posted their things, and it's not that drive-throughs people immediately tagged them as naughty. Some other people on the site tattled, essentially, reported them, and then they got their stuff pulled. And it's so the one of them had an adventure for D&D, the old school. If your audience isn't up on the terminology, for tabletop, there's a subgenre called OSR, old school, and
revival or something
different
like
things to different people.
Yeah,
but it's old school gaming, and he made an adventure for that kind of group, and he was poking at a recent social event or happening, and so he got his product pulled because people were offended by it. And the most recent was similar. They weren't poking at a recent social event. It was just pushing the edge, maybe more from a taste point of view.
Yeah. Was that also Venger, or was it someone else?
So okay. Venger is the first one. I didn't know if we wanted to say names. I'm just.
Oh well, you mentioned it. I was just curious if it was the same guy.
But Venger's
fine. Yeah,
he's not going to get upset. The others were Red Room, and they're very vocal about the issue that happened to them. And I think because it's a husband-wife team, and the female part in the partnership decided to be vocal about her opinions about some other social issues, and I think that's probably why it got pulled, more so than anything else. But
yeah, so it's a woman. It's a woman with the wrong kind of opinion.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
So if you don't toe the line, you get punished.
Yeah, and you lose your status because they generally organize like who gets good treatment based on their identity. But if you are a member of a certain identity that they consider protected and you disagree with them, then you lose your status. You lose the identity. So you're no longer a woman if you're a woman who disagrees, for example.
Right. And see, what they can say is, well, we reinstated it 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks later. But for someone living off of the sale of their product, the first couple of weeks can often be the biggest part of their overall sales. So what they do is they just, ruin their whole momentum with their product. And it's hard to say whether it's purposeful or not, but it's all one-sided. So it's the usual thing, and all of these things, as long as you're with the orthodoxy, you can get away with calling the people that are outside of your orthodoxy all kinds of bad things, but don't dare even
don't criticize the people
about the orthodox. No,
exactly. So let's clarify a couple things in case, just to make sure that people who are listening aren't lost. So DriveThruRPG is basically, and it's I was a big fan until I heard about what happened recently, because it was a place where you could get sort of like independently created expansions and games and resources for running tabletop gaming that isn't just like, you know, coming from the main publisher. So as someone who, you know, the most recent game I played was Cyberpunk Red, I was using DriveThruRPG for tons of resources like, you know, PDF maps and optional rules and adventure ideas and stuff like that. So it's a really great idea because in terms of what its intent was, because essentially it's inviting people, you know, anyone that could just like write up an adventure or create a map or whatever it is, maybe even some optional rules, whatever, right? And those people could sell that product. You know, usually they're very inexpensive. We're talking like, you know, $1. They can get like up there, but a lot of this stuff is really cheap. And it was a great resource for people that were members of, I guess, the hobby of tabletop role-playing games. And it was all based in merit. You know, people who made something good, it probably sold well. You know, it was very simple, straightforward, and it uses the market in a really great way. But apparently, there is the creeping politicization of everything has gotten into this you know, website. And I think that is likely a byproduct of the culture itself changing in a number of ways that sort of preceded that, right? So you have this hobby and it's basically being made political. And the people who have like, you know, a degree of authority over what people can access, because that's what DriveThruRPG was. It was what made it unique was, you know, it was like the biggest place where you can go to find this sort of like homebrew stuff or these extra rules or anything to do with the old school revival, because that's almost all like independent, right? It's not owned by anyone that you know, as I understand it. And so it was almost like this is where a community shares their ideas and their content with other people, you know. And when that became political, when that website became political, it started excluding, right, removing content, banning content, while also promoting what it wants. So you get like, you know, generally you're going to get woke SJW oriented products that are going to be pushed, they're going to be promoted, they're going to be supported because they're giving the message they want, you know. And then like the stuff that is either, you know, it exists to make fun of that, which is the, you know, the first thing you told me about the Venger thing, which, you know, I think he was poking fun. What was the event that he was poking fun at?
It was the recent Roe v. Wade thing.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So he made something to yes, exactly.
It's satirical.
Yeah, sure.
Essence.
Yeah, sure. And so, you know, he put out some content that sort of pokes fun at that. And of course, they find this completely unacceptable because there's only one way you're supposed to feel about Roe v. Wade. And then the other incident that with the Red Room, what was that about? What was the thing that they said? Or is it just because the woman like had opinions on things?
Yeah, well, it's a game setting. I'm not sure if it's a game system, but definitely a game setting and a few adventures that have a tone, and the tone is 70s exploitation.
Oh, okay.
Right? It even has that kind of art sensibility, and there's some sexual overtones to it. And
you're not talking about this game, are you? This is the Spirit of 77?
No.
Oh, okay,
no.
okay.
That's a much older product.
Yeah.
This is I can't remember the name of it, and I should.
It's fine. It's fine.
I'm obviously old, so you have to give me a little leeway. But it's like that, but probably a little more edgy, and it has horror elements, and it's blood and guts. What they did is they described precisely the tone of the game, which was horror, with the background of a sexual meltdown of some kind, right? So it's kind of all mushed together. and it was explicit.
So it sounds like
Not-
they're basically trying to like grasp at like a grindhouse film
yeah,
that has horror elements from the 1970s, right?
Right.
Which exploitation movies of the 70s, they did that all the time. It was basically like, you know, people were cut loose, and then so they were going as far as they could.
right. So they're pushing toward a certain aesthetic, and they weren't hiding anything. And perhaps if they would have cleaned up the what it was supposed to be to something it wasn't in the blurb, maybe they wouldn't have got it pulled or whatever. But it was just the blurb on it. It wasn't the content itself. It was, how dare they go in depth on explaining what this is, so you know what you want to, whether you want to buy it or not. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's odd. And then I understand that on DriveThruRPG, just so that people really understand how unfair it is that these products, they were pulled, right? And I don't know about the Red Room content, but it sounds like it probably was in the same section. But apparently Venger's thing was actually in the adults only, or like a mature kind of rated
Something
product.
like
Yeah, so that, like, you know, children wouldn't come across it,
Right.
which is fair, because if people are making their own kinds of content, then they're obviously going to push the, you know, they're going to probably push against barriers in whatever way they want to try, because most mainstream stuff is, you know, essentially PG-13.
Right. And he made a stink on it on social media. So after that, they updated their terms of service, like all these services do constantly. You never know what you're getting into because they're always updating. So they updated their terms of service essentially. And they had a few different things in there that people described as having a chilling effect on whether they're going to continue to post anything there, because not only are they going to judge your content, they're also going to judge your off-site conduct. So if you post something that they find disparaging in any way against whatever, I mean, they were mentioning protected groups, but it was vague enough so that it could be anything you said. They could latch on to say, oh, that's problematic, so we're going to bounce you out of here.
Yeah.
So stuff that happens off of their site, they're going to look at, like everybody else does these days. Oh,
Yeah.
you know, 20 years ago, you said a bad word, so
You're fired.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is what I mean when I say it's not separate from things that are happening, you know, in other aspects or in other arenas in our life. Because it is all the same thing. It's basically, they're a group of people, they have tremendous power in their specific area. Maybe they're in the HR department at the company, maybe they run a website, maybe they are game programmers or developers, and then they basically decide, you know, these people, they're allowed to participate in society and these people are not. And so we're going to ruin their lives if they're saying the wrong thing. So what was the last straw for you? What was the thing that made you say, you know what, I'm gonna make my own?
Well, it was
service.
the Venger thing.
Yeah.
So, I guess it's been something that's in the back of my head, in different avenues. I've wanted to be creative and do something, and it started with our podcast, then became a YouTube live stream, and this just was like, here, obviously somebody needs to do something, and lots of people are complaining, but they're all kind of throwing their hands up in the air, which is understandable for many of them, because it's tough. I've got a day job, I have a wife, I have stuff to do. Starting a whole new business from scratch out of thin air is a lot to do. And so I'm going to do it anyway, but it's understandable that a game developer just wants to make the game. They don't want to have a website where they have to worry about running it and all this stuff. They just want to make their games, put them out somewhere, so to speak, in a store for people to buy. That's all they want to do. Mm-hmm. So I've gotten some black pilling from people saying, oh, they can just make a website and sell their own stuff. I'm like, if that was such a popular thing to do, more of them would be doing it, right? So they're not. Most people go along to get along, so they'll, bear under the burden of this website and their strong arm tactics. Most people don't make controversial content, so they'll just fly under the radar. So it's just your few that do, and then you others that don't, but they're really mad, because I've heard from them too, and I've gotten a lot of support from many people, and it's pretty gratifying. But this is my first business. It's not my day job to make a website or sell things online. So this is all new for me, but someone's got to do it, or someone should. I didn't hear anybody volunteering, so I did. That's essentially why I did.
Sometimes that's what has to happen. Like in the world of comic books, for example, there's a lot going on that's very similar. There are some independent comic book writers and artists are coming together, and they're trying to make content to compete with the mainstream industry, because the mainstream industry is doing the same thing. It's like cramming political messaging. It's completely forgotten what comic books are and what they're for, and so people are making alternatives. And of course, because the thing that you're pushing back against is bigger than most people think, they run into problems. They run into all these other obstacles from other big tech companies. For example, I don't know the full story behind it, but I am not all that surprised that there was a guy named Eric July, and he created and you know all about it. And he decided, he was sick and tired of his favorite books being poorly written. He said, I'm going to do my own thing. And of course, Comicsgate was a thing for a while. That a lot of Ethan Van Sciver and like lots of other people, even I made a book for it. It's been a growing thing. And so he did a fundraiser. He raised something like $3 million. He's basically getting ready to ship it all out. And apparently PayPal is holding on to like half of his money. And we don't know why at this stage. We don't know what that's about. But it does seem to me like, they're basically obstructing him from doing what he wants, because no one on the other side of this, I guess you could say, expected this a level of interest and this level of success. And so wherever you go, you're going to run into that. Look at how the media propagandizes films and TV shows that are not a part of the wokeness. Like they're just people wanting to tell a good story, or maybe it's, I think that there's other markers, like if it's got a positive masculine portrayal in it, then they hate it, right? They call it far right, MAGA, fantasy, whatever, right? They did this.
Didn't they do that with the most recent series? I haven't seen it yet. The
Terminal List.
Terminal List.
Yeah, they did it with Terminal List. They did it with Top Gun. The sequel.
Did they do that with oh boy,
Jack Reacher? Yes, they did. They did it with Jack Reacher. They did it with even like the last Rambo film, which was a few years ago. So this is not new. They've been doing this for a while. The idea is they want to control the culture. They don't want people to, see any positive portrayals of men behaving as men. And it's all about, and it starts with men, but it's not exclusive to that. It's just,
correct.
They have like a hierarchy of, things that they hate, and then anything that makes that look good, they have to oppose. So, but I think that men and masculinity is sort of like, and this is the reason why we talk about masculinity on this show typically, and men, that's where the root of it is. It's actually at the center. It's the most important thing. Yes, John Wick, somebody mentioned, they're going to attack that. I know they announced the 4th John Wick movie. I promise you, they're going to attack that. They're going to call it a toxic masculinity fest or something, because it's something that men like. It's something that men enjoy. And if you ever noticed, all of the hobbies that get attacked, they're male dominated. They're basically mostly occupied by men, or boys even. So it's all the same stuff, right? And I think that the other thing I was gonna bring up is that I think that what you're doing is really important. That's basically what I wanted to support. We have to create alternatives and support those alternatives. So that's the reason why. I mean, you came to me, but I thought, yeah, I definitely want to promote this. So, what? Let me ask you this, because I don't know if you've thought, for most people, they just kind of like react to this bullying that's going on, right? This kind of like this reputation destruction, the social, hostility that people are experiencing.
Very feminine.
It is. It's very feminine, and we've talked about that too. But it's most people that when they come across this, they have no idea where this came from, what it's about, and so they don't quite like understand it. But have you where do you think, in your opinion, where do you think this is coming from? Why is this happening?
Well, when I was a young lad, half my age, maybe a little younger, there's a magazine for our hobby called Dragon Magazine.
Remember that?
And there was an article saying, hey, why don't we have more references to her in books instead of it all being he all the time? And even then I didn't know precisely how English worked, that he had become kind of a neutral term to be used in writing just for simplicity. It
just
wasn't
like the word
sexist.
man.
It's just, it's what was done. It wasn't from a sexist point of view. It was more of ease, and it just stuck over time. But people started there. That was the first article I saw like that for the game, but then not a whole lot came of it. But outside in the broader culture, I would say 10, 15 years ago, it's hard to say. I've only really forced myself to become more culturally aware and not in my own little world since Trump was elected. And not for the reason most people. Hold on a second.
No problem.
My dog wants to come in here. But so I thought that election year, we had him and Hillary Clinton. And I was like, what happened? So at least there were some good things he did in office, but I was never a fan. But I just thought it was so odd that someone so unlikable as Hillary Clinton would be chosen, because she was, that was her second or third try.
But I believe it was like her third try, because she did run against Obama in the primaries and lost. And she may have even tried before that, but I don't remember.
I don't remember if it was her second or third time, but that's it. She's I don't think she's not gonna run again, I hope. Anyway.
Well, she doesn't have to. She can just get whoever is the candidate to do everything she says. But yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
She won't be in the office
currently.
So. Yeah, exactly.
So getting away from the candidates, it just seemed weird. And I was like, why am I so, it seemed unreal. So I just started listening to different kinds of people's ideas and thoughts. I started with some feminists, because I wanted to know why they thought that 1 in 4 men raped women.
Yeah, or 1 in 4 women would be raped, I think is
right.
The statistic.
Right. So but it got transposed so that it made you think that 1 out of every 4 men is a rapist. So when I dug into it, I found out that it was a bogus study anyway. So as far as I could tell. And so I started expanding to different people. And I just realized that that, well, we've been lied to, that the media just, tells us a story. And where I think this ultimately comes from is feminism.
Yes, it does.
It's
very good. You are right. It
comes from feminism.
Yes, it does.
And it's an overcorrection, in my opinion. So perhaps back in the day, women were treated poorly. Or not perhaps, it did happen. Women were treated poorly to some extent. And instead of being content with just saying, hey, we want a fair shake, because it didn't stop there. They wanted the word equality, which isn't, you can't apply the word equality, in my opinion, not in its truest form, to people, because you can do things I can't do. I can do things you can't do. We're not equal. I can't walk into your house and replace you. You can't do that here.
Right.
And men and women can't replace each other. So the word equality got kind of radicalized. We want radical equality. We want to be everywhere men are at, to such an extent that we're going to destroy men's clubs. They did that back in the 90s.
Late 90s. Before, they were doing that in the 20s and the turn of the century. Because there were places where men could get together and share wisdom, impart advice, just talk, whatever, and they would drink, and this was like prohibition was caused by women complaining that men were spending too much time with their friends. So we got prohibition because of first wave feminism, which is why, we don't have to get too deep into it, but I know that it's a commonly held belief that women were treated unfairly or whatever in the past. But the more you look into it, the more that's not true. Men have always taken care of women since the beginning of time because they had to, because women were the limiting factor in reproduction, right? So if anything, what people consider when it comes to women, what people consider to be perhaps oppression or injustice is actually just women's security being prioritized, which women in general prefer. In general, women, if you ask them, would you rather be free or would you rather be safe? The average woman she'll say, I would rather be safe. And that's literally the reason why in Islamic countries, the women wear burqas and they're not allowed to drive and all of that, because the man has to do all that for them. So, I think that we have a misconception of the understanding of the relationship between men and women based on the fact that women will, in general, prefer to be safe more than free, and men generally prefer to be free more than safe. So men take the risks, but they also take care of the women, and that's where women draw their security from. So anyway, it's a difficult thing for most people to understand. So I appreciate you giving that a listen. But yes, I think that you're basically getting it mostly right on target. The thing about feminism is that it is not, first of all, it's not women. It's a set of ideas. So it exists independent of females. But a lot of women find it very attractive because it speaks to their feelings. And so they say, this is why so many women don't have a problem identifying with feminism, even though it doesn't actually have their interests. It just sounds like it does. And even women who don't identify with the term, they identify with a lot of the values of it. So if you say, well, do you believe that men have historically oppressed women to the benefit of themselves and at the expense of women? I think the average person, even man, will probably say, yeah, sure, even if they believe it's not a thing anymore. And I think that lie is extremely harmful because I don't think there's any evidence for it. And there are it's an evolutionary thing, right? Like even if you're not religious, but you understand that we are the way we are now because of thousands of generations of evolution, then it makes perfect sense that men are the way they are towards women, which of course the average man cares about women. Like, if a woman is crying in a restaurant and she's alone at like a table, everyone is going to go up to her and say, are you okay? Do you need something? Right? Like, should I call someone? But if a man is doing the same thing, people will be like, oh, I think something's wrong with that guy. And they're basically going to like avoid him because they're going to think he might snap, right? He might shoot up the restaurant. So, and that's an evolved thing. Like it comes from our history. So, I'm going to get off that soapbox because it's not that important, but
it's a topic that can be hours long in the discussion of.
Yeah, and I think that, like, I'm just putting it out there in case somebody watches this, has never seen our content. I think that there's a plethora of myths that came from feminism about the human condition that have to be combated at every turn because, as you said, all this comes from that. Here's another lie. Let me ask you, how long do you think women have been allowed to play tabletop games?
Since the beginning.
Exactly.
We had one at our table.
Yeah. So Gary Gygax had women at his table when he was creating D&D, right?
Right.
So then why are we told
of wage? There was a broad set of ages as well.
Mm-hmm. And races. But why are we told that tabletop gaming has historically not been inclusive if we know it's always been inclusive?
Because it's possible that a woman somewhere was told, we don't want you at our table. It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, this must happen everywhere. Or there could be some people that have honestly had that experience and some people that are just playing it up. So to say precisely why is kind of hard. I have never been around anyone who would not let anybody at the table that they were played at based on anything except maybe hygiene,
yeah,
or something,
or some personality quirk that,
sure,
is intolerable. Right.
Well,
that's what I was going to say. So like in my experience, I mean, I'm a minority and my friends in Chicago, most of them were minorities, and we discovered D&D through our, a friend of ours I went to high school with, and I was playing it that long. Like no one ever said, well, I don't know, man, you don't look very white. Like that never happens, right? But we're told this is a narrative that gets repeated over and over and over, and then people start to believe it because the last thing that people like gamers who tend to be a bit more introverted, a bit more intellectual, and they want to be seen as good people. So, they try to remain open and tolerant. I think that gets used against them because they get told if you don't, change the way that you run your table, if you don't have like a certain quota of people of different races, sexes, and, sexual proclivities, then you're a bad person. And of course they get hung up on that. But it's so absurd because it's literally people choosing of their own volition to play a game with their friends, which, whatever your friend group is, that's what your gaming group is. And it doesn't matter if they're all white or if they're like all the colors in the rainbow, it doesn't change anything. But there is a narrative. The narrative is that, we have to treat these people extra special because historically they were always treated badly. Like even in the case that you describe, where a woman, let's say, was turned away at the table, and maybe they even went so far as to say, no girls allowed, get out of here, go back to the kitchen, right? Even if they said all that, why would she want to insist to play with those people?
Right.
The whole, like, why, and that's the thing too, is that they do want to push themselves into spaces that they claim are hostile towards them. But why would you do that? Like, why wouldn't you just say, you know what, I'm going to find some different people? I mean, like, I've been at tables where, there have been like awful people, and I was like, I think I'm just gonna leave. It was usually at conventions because, you know, when I game with my friends, it's my friends. So
Right.
like, you know, like, and that's like what 99% of all groups. So this narrative is ridiculous on its face, and yet there are plenty of people who believe it.
Right. And I'll tell you
So-
what, it makes me, if I was, which I don't, but just because I don't need to, if I was to run a game out of a game store, if somebody was walking up to the table and they had blue hair, I might say this table is full, because you just don't know.
You don't. Yeah, they might though. They might show up, and then their whole purpose is to be disruptive.
Right.
Because
and
and
they might sit down and be fine, but
I know that, and you got a good point, because now, like, I mean, there was always especially when you're playing with strangers, there was always the risk that you're going to have someone at your table that, again, you know, doesn't jive
Right.
with you.
and that happens in all social settings.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
So
it
when
happens
you meet
everywhere.
strangers for the first time, you never know what you're going to get,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't always gel with your group or you individually. So
Yeah, exactly. And then you just have to either, you know, make the appropriate call and say, I'm sorry, you're not a good fit. Or maybe you just figure, well, you know, if you don't think it's that difficult to endure, then you just sort of stick it out because it's a one shot or something. And then
Right.
afterwards, you know, you might, like, I don't know, call a friend and say, holy crap, we had this weird guy at our table. Right. But I mean, yeah, like this is, and that's the thing too, is that this specific hobby, it does attract kind of misfits, you know.
Sure.
So and I don't have a problem with that, but then, like, again, these people, these like cultural vandals, their whole thing is they're bullying some of the weakest, well, I don't want to say weakest, some of the most maybe the most vulnerable people in, you know, in our culture. Like, if they're, like I said, maybe they've been alone for a lot of their life, maybe they have, like, you know, they're extremely socially awkward, and so, like, their escape is this, right?
Right.
And then they'll attack them and call them bigots, and you know,
Right.
how do they cope with that? So
Mhm. Yeah. So many of us are socially awkward.
mhm.
I mean, it's taken a long. I mean, I was, but you know, after 40 years playing, you kind of have to work around that. So
Yeah.
to be able to play with strangers and
Yeah.
different people from different backgrounds and whatnot, but many of us will take a lot of abuse so that we don't feel like we don't feel like we're bigots, or we want to have more friends, so we'll accept that person's odd quirks, even though they say things that are sometimes mean. So in the same vein, when these cultural vandals, as you have put it, want to push into a game table, say at a game store, folks there in our hobby will tolerate them overly much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they get a little emboldened by that, so they just
Take it a bit further, and they also do, like, they can sort of sense when their cry bullying would be effective, and they use it on these guys. And that's the thing too, is, like, you know, like I said, a lot of these guys are very soft spoken, they're very sweet, you know, they might be a bit weird, they may put their foot in their mouth or something, but in general it's mostly forgivable.
Sure.
And so the thing I was going to ask next is, all right, so we know what the problem is, and I'm glad that you were able to identify that, because I think that it's a set of ideas. It's not women, obviously not. If a woman wants to play, you know, and she's just there to be a part of the fun, and she's not there to make it all about herself, then, you know, you're going to be fine. It's about the ideology. So the website. Oh, go ahead.
I want to interject just one little bit. There's probably a writer, I would say, along with it, or maybe associated with it, and it's the postmodern crowd.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think that feminism got deconstructed a little bit by the postmodernists, and then they brought in all of the groups that they could possibly bring in.
Yeah,
you know,
intersectionality.
the alphabet mafia, right?
Yeah, the G mafia, as I call them.
Right. So, and I don't have a problem with people being whatever way they are.
Right.
Right. But when you club everybody over the head with the way you are and insist that they affirm how you are, instead of just saying, okay, you do you, which is what most of us, we just want to get left alone. Leave me alone. Just do your thing. I'll do my thing. So, but there's part of that. I don't know if that's straight attributable to feminism or if the postmodern crowd that really kind of expanded that horizon brought it in along as a writer, because that's playing into this too. It's not just, you know, women want equality squared or cubed or whatever.
Sure.
But you have everyone else who feels slighted glomming onto that.
I would, my theory is that postmodernism is basically it dragged or sucked or swallowed feminism inside of itself, or maybe the opposite. But it's essentially, postmodernism is a tool that feminists use because it allows them to, you know, declare whatever they think the truth is. You know, it's like, from my point of view, this is true, right? And it works in tandem with other concepts that are all layered within feminism. Like you mentioned, essentially intersectional feminism, or intersectionality, which is all of the other identity groups being sort of lumped in. And also there's cultural, or cultural relativism or moral relativism, where they basically say, you know, you may think this thing is bad, but I think that this thing is good, and here's like my, you know, reasoning. And then they use these language games where they redefine words to mean other things, and then they use that to make their argument, and now you have to, like, you know, accept it. At least that's what they think. But it's generally about, you know, concealing the truth behind a bunch of words, and those words and that language, it comes from moral relativism and postmodernism.
Right.
And
the true believers you cannot argue with.
No, because their whole thing is
arguing with them reaffirms their beliefs within themselves. Yeah.
Yes, you will never change their mind.
Right.
But and it's all about them making, they don't even have to be right. They just want to appear right. So it's all about, like, you know, how good they are at rhetoric, which a lot of the more active people, they specialize in rhetoric. They specialize in using words to win arguments, even if what they're saying is a complete lie. So yeah, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, and most people don't know that, right? They're not aware of it. They just sort of like think that these people are good faith actors that are just putting their views out there, but they're clearly distorting reality with words. So it's and that's, you know, like why so why do you think the culture is what's being, like, manipulated here? Why do you think this is under attack?
Well, culture, people make culture. So you change people's minds, then the culture changes over time, and then the culture bleeds into everything else. So you get it, and this isn't my idea. I glommed this off of listening to various people, Eric July being one of them. I've listened to him for the last year and a half. Michael Malice, a lot of people on the libertarian side of things. Jordan Peterson, lots of different people, and some Christian apologists, just everybody, lots of people talking about this kind of thing. And it seems that you get control of culture, and the way they did that is making us think, or taking advantage of the idea that many people didn't care about the culture. So, oh, you don't care about it, so I'll take it on. I believe Herbert Marcuse came up with the idea that culturally, through media, you could kind of take over things.
You can engineer.
And engineer it. And so it didn't happen fast as he thought it would, I believe. So, but it has been happening in different. It's kind of because reality is messy. So it's taken. It didn't take that long with Hollywood. Hollywood's been subverting normal moral activity for a long time.
A long time, yeah. It's just that it was subtle at first, and now it's not.
And it's seeped everywhere. And it's fine. And it made it into role-playing games maybe a couple of decades ago, in the background, when Wizards of the Coast kind of took over the D&D IP, and they didn't make they didn't make any noise about cultural shifts. They just made the game. And even 4th edition, it wasn't until 5th edition, in my opinion, that you really saw them kind of come out of the woodwork. And that could be a number of things. You could have had people who were progressive types that didn't care. They just wanted to make games. They had their political opinions, but they didn't want to really push them on anybody. But they hired other progressive people because they're buddies. Why not? Why not? So they eventually, like a lot of companies, they get folks in HR that are these kinds. And then in HR, they'll start hiring people. They may not say anything themselves, but they'll hire the people that will eventually, either intentionally or just happenstance. That's the way it's going to happen.
Yep. And they make that time. Yeah. Well, that's happening. Like HR people talk to each other, and and there's all kinds of other factors. Like there's like the they call it the social credit score, but it's got a different and the companies have to abide by that, and the HR
ESG
is a part of ESG. Thank you. Yes, ESG. And so these things are really bleeding into like every aspect of our life, and it's happening really fast now. And so people need to wake up, and they need to say something. And again, this is, and I believe the reason why they go after the culture is, and this is probably along the same lines of what you were saying, people they get their ideas about things like ethics and morality and the world as it should be to them based on the culture. So what the culture is saying, if they don't believe they're being lied to, and in most cases people don't have any reason to think that, then they're going to say, oh yeah, we need more of this because I saw it on this, in this movie, I read about it in my rule book for D&D. This is the reason why I think there was a Vampire the Masquerade book that had a whole blurb about how you shouldn't be allowed to play Nazis in this game. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you can be a vampire, just don't be like a vampire with opinions on demographics, I guess. And
suck the blood out of every human on the planet, but don't be a Nazi.
Yeah, exactly.
And only wanted to kill part of the world.
Yeah, right. You just want to kill everyone, and that's fine. So but these are the things when even though it's ludicrous, when they put that in there, first of all, people are like, why would you need to bring this up? I don't know any Nazis. They're not that common, right? But they think that what they're doing is some act of courage and heroism by putting it in there. And if people say this seems like a waste of time, then they say, you're the people that I'm trying to warn people about. Right, right. And so
they're so concerned about the right side of authoritarianism, they're not looking at the left side of authoritarianism, if there even is really that kind of a distinction. It's all authoritarian. Who cares whether they are nationalists or don't care? It's right. They're still authoritarian, so they're all going to force you to do stuff.
The problem with authoritarianism is the authoritarianism, and that's the problem, right? So but I think what's going on there too is that they're clearly authoritarian. Everything is done under a threat of something. If they can send people with guns to your house, they will. But in culturally, we're not at that point. So instead, what they do is they try to get you fired. They try to get you banned. They censor you. That only comes from them. No one else is doing that. Like,
Right.
even like, you know, what a thing that gets brought up with regards to D&D is the satanic panic of the 1970s and 80s, right?
Right.
And that was annoying, but I don't remember anyone banning anything back then. I don't remember like the you know, the fundamentalist Christian conservative getting a job at SS, you know, at you know, a gaming company so that they could specifically inject their religion into the game. Like, that's never happened. So this is not even comparable to that.
No,
this is like a whole other level.
Panic went over like a lead balloon.
Yeah.
They said, "Oh, we really shouldn't do that again." The whole censoring thing from the 50s through probably the 70s, 80s ish. It was like, yeah, that was a bad idea. We shouldn't do that again.
I mean,
and you didn't hear from the conservatives much, except for, here's our opinion on things, but we're not
exactly
forcing it on you.
Exactly. That's all. Like, my mother, she was one of those people. She thought, oh, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, I've read about that. It's like, you know, there's, you know, the usual, like,
it was
think of the
lies
children.
Anyway.
It was a load of shit anyway. But she never like took my stuff. She never like punished me for it. She just said, well, I wish you wouldn't play that. And I did it anyway, because I didn't, you know, I knew that she didn't get it. But it wasn't like she said, I'm going to go get a job at, you know, Gary Gygax's company and I'm going to put Jesus in the game. Like, that never happened. But these people are literally doing this. Like, they're putting their religion into the game. So it is far and away worse. So, you know, I just want to say, this is my opinion. I'm sick of that comparison. Don't make it, because the satanic panic is nothing like this. Nothing.
Right.
So this is far, far, far worse. So, like,
sure.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about Big Geek Emporium a little bit more. Let's plug this. How's it going? Do you have like any, what stage are you at in the development of this website, this alternative?
It's a bit slow going because I was mentioning to you before we started, I have a day job which doesn't involve programming or website development at all, and so it's always been a sideline for me, a hobby, something I enjoy doing. So it's not something that I'm unfamiliar with. It's just not my first set of skills. So it's slow going. I'm using off-the-shelf software, so I have to kind of cobble it together to make it work. And having a website isn't hard, but having a website where you have multiple vendors who have to get paid and some level of not safe for work shielding, and what I want to do is have a robust filtering list, so it's easier to find your stuff in a good search engine. Because some complaints I've heard about DriveThruRPG, and I've only used it sporadically, so it's not like I'm aware of everything wrong with it, or all the complaints at least, is the search engine doesn't work very well. You can put the name of a creator in there and it won't find it, which is weird. It should be easy to find a creator, because you want somebody who wants to buy something from someone to find the person they want to buy from, so so they spend as little time between getting to your site and making the decision to buy. So that, and banning people and stuff, it seems like DriveThru just hates money for some reason. I'm not about doing that. So even someone who is pushing a narrative in their book that's obvious, but it isn't something that's illegal, I don't care if they want to sell on that site. So the piece that I'm really lacking right now is print on demand, because it involves some programming and stuff that, while I'm familiar with it, I haven't done in a while. So I would say I would like to be able to have the site up sometime in August, late August maybe, but it's hard to say because I'm only doing this by myself. If I can get enough funding, I can hire a programmer, a web developer to help out. And that can be expensive if you want to get what you pay for. So if you want quality, you pay for it.
Yeah.
So I've talked to someone, and I just haven't gotten enough support to be able to hire her. So as soon as it's going to happen one way or the other. Either I'm going to do it all and it's going to take a while, or I'm going to get enough funding, or maybe someone comes along and says, hey, I'll just do it. I'll accept it.
Of course. I think that there is no better time to do this than now. Again, I mentioned the Eric July thing, but I think this stuff is changing. The culture is changing everywhere, and I think that, this is like the best time to do this. Hopefully, and I'll tell you guys, check out the links in the description. Send them a few bucks if you could help them out. Even if you're not a tabletop gamer, maybe you just, want to see alternatives succeed. Maybe we need people who are willing to essentially just serve the customers, because that's all we're talking about. It doesn't even have to be ideological, right?
This site it's not. The only ideology we're going to have is it's an open platform, and I want you to get money so I can.
Yeah.
Right. This is a business. This is a business, but it's going to be strictly business. So I don't care what you think. I don't care how you look. You put in a product. If people like it, they'll pay for it, and word will get out.
Yeah.
Very simple.
That's all it is. And honestly, if you can get the ball started on that, I think that you have a very good chance of, catching up to, if not superseding, DriveThruRPG, because what they're doing is excluding people. What they're doing is doing so on ideological grounds. And there are going to be people who are like, well, that's not right, right? Even if they wouldn't have bought the products anyway, they might just on principle say this is wrong. And it is wrong. It's, it's censorship. It's basically, at the end of the day, a business can work with or not work with whoever they want. But the problem is that, if you're excluding people and some competitor isn't, then the competitor is probably going to do better in the long run.
Right. Because there's going to be to somebody else.
Yeah.
You can have the gayest product pointed right at the gay people, and it's the gayest game since gay has been gay. I'm not trying to be insulting, but there's gay people who you wouldn't know, and then there's gay people you're like, oh, okay. But
yeah, definitely no. Yeah.
Right. And there are certainly products that are marketed toward that, like Thirsty Sword Lesbians is the name of a game.
I remember that one.
Right. So if you have a product like that, come sell it. I don't care.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right. And where I see that you have a PayPal or a PayPal, a Streamlabs, and an Anchor. So are any of those okay for donating to your?
Any of them are okay. PayPal so far has not withheld funds from me.
Okay.
I don't expect that they will. What you can do to help, even if you don't have the money or don't feel like contributing, that's fine either way. Come to BiggusGeekus on YouTube, help us get our subscriber count up, and we'll be able to get the word out better the more reach we have.
Yeah.
Or just talk about it amongst yourselves, your friends, and generate some buzz about the whole situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, if you're a hobbyist, and maybe you've noticed what's been going on, I like I said before, I strongly suggest you look into alternatives, so that you're not giving money to people who hate you, because that's ultimately what we're trying to prevent. So, another thing, what if there is, because we got some pretty smart people that watch us. So what if there is someone who, would like to help you build out your site? Could they contact you if that comes up, or what?
Yes. Let's see.
I put your Twitter. I put your Twitter in the.
Yeah, DM me on Twitter.
Yeah,
I'm on there every day.
Yeah, I put your Twitter in the chat, and I believe there's might be an email No, I don't see it. But yeah, your Twitter is in there and your YouTube. You can send comments on YouTube.
Yeah, so DMing me on Twitter would be best, I think, if you're on Twitter. If not, we and you comment on a video somewhere, we'll figure out how to be more direct. But yeah, because I'm a masochist a bit, I'm on Twitter every day.
All right. I guess like the last thing I'll ask. Oh, I got some super chats. I should read those first. All right. So Legion of Myth, hello Max. It says gives us $5 and says #RPGate, escapism, not representation, entertainment over activism, natural organic conclusion, not forced diversity. Well, again, like, you know, those things are very straightforward. I mean, especially the natural organic inclusion. Like if you literally are just playing with people who your friends are, then it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter if they're all white dudes or if they're or if they're unicorns. Like those are your friends. Those are the people you get to play with. They can't alter your friend group to match their dream idea of what an ideal gaming group looks like. It's not their business. So you don't even owe them that explanation. Derek Workman, but thank you for the super chat. Derek Workman gives us $5 and says gamers should never forget, tell stories about Nazis in Nazi Germany. He's being funny. And like, you know, I have like speaking of Nazis, I have a tabletop game that I used to play that I absolutely loved, that was called Weird War. I think it was called Weird War 2 or Weird Wars 2, and it's basically like a D20 game. So this was after 3rd edition came out, but you play squad members during World War II. So it's like playing like, you know, on Saving Private Ryan, but it has horror and Lovecraft elements in it. So, you know, very cool game. And yeah, you get to fight Nazis and sometimes they turn into werewolves. Why would you pass that up? Like, why wouldn't you want that?
That's good stuff. So,
yeah, absolutely. All right. So anyway, we're going to wrap it up here. Let us know what you guys think about what we talked about in the comments. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications so you know when our shows go live. Again, check out the links in the description. Show this guy some support if you can. I think, again, this is really important stuff, and we need to create more alternatives. And I believe that the momentum is in our favor right now because things are starting to shift. People are really getting sick and tired of this cultural vandalism. And most importantly, please share this video because sharing is caring. And again, it helps us get reach, and it also helps our guests get reach. We have to, like, you know, try to continue to form a wider net, a wider network around these discussions so that, like, you know, we can help other people build alternative platforms while also spreading the message as to why those platforms are necessary. So, thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of the Fireside Chat. Thank you, Joe, for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I hope that this works out for you. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you guys in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.